1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. Most of my guests have lived experience with domestic violence, sexual assault, and/or trafficking. Today, I'm honored to welcome someone who chose this work as an ally. Please help me in welcoming Anthony Pasquini as we talk about why men's voices are so important in the fight against domestic violence, as well as his work with Wings. Here's Anthony. Hi, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining me on 1 in 3 and welcome.
Thank you. I was going to say good morning. It's 1 p.m. Good afternoon.
I know.
Thank you for having
Who
me.
knows? Nobody knows what time it is anymore. I don't know what day it is, what month it is. We're already in 2026, that's hard enough to figure out. So, okay, we have a lot of interesting topics to talk about today. But before we do that, could you just give a little bit of a background on yourself so listeners can get to know you some?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Anthony Pasquini. I'm out of the Chicagoland area. I am a practicing attorney. I've been practicing law going on 12 years now. 8 of those years, I was a criminal prosecutor in 2 separate counties. I worked on domestic violence cases. I worked on violent felonies, robberies, burglaries, everything from traffic cases, all the way up to felony cases. So a wide variety there. I've worked hand in hand with law enforcement to assist them in their investigations, which did include a number of domestic violence cases, child abuse cases, regulations, you name it, we worked on it. Currently, I work as a labor and employment attorney on behalf of law enforcement with the Metropolitan Alliance of Police. We're a labor union representing local law enforcement, suburban law enforcement in Illinois, law enforcement agencies, rather, in Illinois. And over the last couple of years, I've been getting involved with domestic abuse advocacy work, specifically through an organization that I just think is absolutely incredible. It's called Wings, W-I-N-G-S, and it's like nothing I've ever experienced before. The opportunities that they give people, the services that they provide is really something that has been very impactful on the way that I view the communities around me, the communities that I'm involved in, and the resources that they have to help people is it's phenomenal. So I've been doing that for the past 2 years, and working with them has really just completely changed the way that I perceive the world around me.
So a lot of times people who come on who get active in the domestic violence community have a personal reason to do so. How did you get involved with Wings? Was it with or how did you want to start getting more involved with domestic violence? Was it because of the work that you had done before?
A lot of that has to do with my line of work. When I was a law student, I had no idea what being a lawyer meant. I was under the impression that being an attorney meant, a nice corporate gig or a nice big law firm with a corner office on LaSalle Street downtown. And I tried that a little bit in law school, and I really didn't like it. It wasn't for me. And a friend suggested, why don't you check out the state's attorney's office? And I had no idea what the state's attorney's office was. I didn't watch Law and Order. I didn't watch SVU or any of that. So that was uncharted territory for me. But I'll never forget driving up to 26 in California as a second-year law student and seeing the courthouse and walking into the office and hearing about what they did, and then finally getting my hands on cases. And I fell in love with it. So I dedicated my career, or a good majority of it so far, to public service. And even though I don't work in that line of the industry anymore, it's still something that I hold very dear to me. And I have not let go of being of service to people. And so how I got involved in it was primarily through my job. I worked in domestic violence courtroom as a misdemeanor assistant for about a year, maybe a little bit more. And that was a wild experience. And it made me appreciate the things that people have going on in their lives and how these cases affect people. But it wasn't really until I had left being a prosecutor that I started to dig more into things that I could do outside of work. And so I actually attended, Wings was hosting, along with the Chicago Bar Association and a couple other sponsors, a domestic violence symposium that was held in downtown Chicago. And so I attended that. And what really sparked my engagement was, and this was an all-day event, every speaker that got up, every panel, every presenter got up and said, take a look around the room and see how many male faces are in here, how many men are in here. And I looked around, and admittedly, at first, I got a little defensive, and I was like, well, there's a good chunk of guys here. Like, I'm a guy, like, I'm here. Doesn't that mean anything? And the longer the day went on, the more that topic got brought up, and the more I looked around, and I went from feeling frustrated or defensive about it to a different kind of mad, because I looked around and I noticed the male faces have dwindled, and there's not as many at the end of the day as we started at the beginning of the day. And so I emailed my bar association president, and I emailed the Wings just general line saying, hey, I want to be involved. I got to do something. But this was a line of work that I fell in love with, and to not be in a courtroom in that capacity anymore, there's a void that I feel for that. So this really spoke to me. I believe it called to me, and I never stopped running after that. They responded right away. Everyone responded right away. And we came up with different ways to, come up with initiatives to work on that very issue, is addressing getting men involved, because it really was a moment where I had to step back and think about, like, why was I upset at the beginning of the day? Why did I get so defensive about it? Because having seen how the day played out, and, hindsight being 2020, they were absolutely right to bring that up as much as they did. And clearly it worked. Here I am today talking about this issue because it is something that needs to be discussed. And so over the last 2 years, one through Wings and one through my local bar association, I've given 2 separate presentations now on the importance of getting men involved. And I tell that story because I think it's important for people to understand. You gotta hold yourself accountable before you can hold anyone else accountable. And understanding why I was defensive about it, and then understanding why they were so assertive in that message, it forced me to take that step back and say, 1 or 2 guys in the room at the end of the day isn't enough. It's not enough. And this is an issue that transcends everything. It's non-political. It's non-secular. It has nothing to do with, preferences or cultural biases or anything like that. It is an issue that transcends everything. And it's about taking care of our people. It comes with taking care of our friends, our family, our neighbors, our kids, our friends' kids, people we don't know, because you don't know what people are struggling with. And, unfortunately, I think that we've, lived in a society where this topic is not as heavily discussed, and there's aspects of it that have been normalized. So, throughout the last 2 years, I've done a lot of research on it. I've talked to a lot of people. I've done, my own soul searching to figure out what is the message that I feel like we're missing, and that I think that I can communicate to get people to be involved and to feel included. And that's how we got here. That's how it started with my career. And then leaving that career and figuring out how can I still be of service to people, having left the only way that I knew how to be of service to people.
Why do you think there are so little men who, there are for sure men who are involved in the domestic violence community, but why do you think it's such a difficult concept or topic for men to feel that they should get involved with it?
Because we don't talk about it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but I'm going to. We don't talk about it. No one is, screaming from the mountaintop, be better. And I do think, again, that we've developed and grown in a society where abuse and violence has been desensitized. In entertainment, you can go back to old black and white Westerns. Those movies, those shorts, those shows mostly revolved around the big, tough cowboy that was of little words, but great strength, and a damsel in distress that was hogtied to a railroad track needing rescue. And if she said something out of line, well, then she got a slap. And that was normal. It was laughed at. It was brushed off as, oh, she's crazy. And look at him, like knocking some sense into her. Like we grew up with that. Generations have grown up with that. So we don't talk about men's roles in changing that dynamic. And it's gotten better over time. And I like the discussions about toxic masculinity, because I think that that's important to address too. But I also think it's important to address that masculinity in and of itself is not inherently toxic, and it doesn't have to be toxic. And you could be a man of few words with great strength that can use those few words with a powerful message. I am not a man of few words. I talk a lot, and I hope I convey a lot when I speak, because this is something that I think needs to be discussed more. And I think the idea of men being vulnerable, being empathetic, being sympathetic is just having the surface being scratched in these kind of conversations. And, for me, on a personal level, what I pride myself on in my career, which I've tried to carry over into my personal life, is that no matter where I go, I do think I'm the toughest person in the room. And I thought that because of the line of work that I did, standing up for victims, for their rights, for families that wanted to be rectified, to be made whole, and to work with some families that could never be made whole because they lost a loved one, or their loved one was so abused that they'll never be the same again. And that made me feel strong standing up for those people. But now I feel strong for a different reason. And that's because I do feel comfortable addressing my own vulnerabilities, talking about what makes me a strong man, but what also makes me not necessarily a weak man, but where my vulnerabilities lie and the things that I know that can hurt me. And I have learned over time through conversations with friends, with family, through going to therapy, is learning what those feelings are, what those thoughts that you're having are, and how to communicate them. And so I to answer the question in an incredibly long-winded way, I think it's because we're not talking about it. At the very least, we're not talking about it enough in the way that we should. And I believe that the way that we should be talking about that is how to be a strong man while addressing your vulnerabilities.
Okay. And so, I mean, I imagine it would be intimidating looking around a room and seeing that you're one of two or three men left in this venue, but then taking that step to go ahead and be one of the men who wants to speak out. What difference do you think it makes for men to speak out? Do you think that it has an impact on other men, on the entire domestic violence community?
I think it does.
Okay. I mean, I do too.
Yeah, I think it has a profound effect. Because I think for so long, this issue has been predominantly discussed through women, through the eyes of what it's like to be a woman who's been abused, a woman who's watched their child be abused. And we forget that those perspectives are the overwhelming majority of domestic abuse cases. 86% of domestic violence cases affect women and young children. But men are affected by it too. And I think some of that has those numbers, the way that they're existing, which is nobody's certainly not the victim's fault. But I think it's made it hard for men to come forward and say, I'm a victim too. I've been abused. I've been hit because of the same standard, that the cowboy standard, strong silent type. You have to be the strong silent type. And I think we're just getting to a point in our society where it's becoming more normalized for men to say, no, I've been on the receiving end of that, and I don't like it. I didn't like the way that felt, but they don't feel like they have an outlet to do that. And if they do, it's kind of thin ice that they have to walk on. But I think when you break down those walls, and I say this as someone, full disclosure, I have not suffered abuse. I have not been abused, and I'm very fortunate for that. I didn't grow up in a household where that was a thing we had to be concerned about. I don't consider that in my day-to-day life, raising a hand or raising my voice to my wife or my family. That's I'm very fortunate in that regard. But I will say this: you do not have to be a victim. You do not have to be someone who has experience in this area, this subject matter, to speak out and to have an opinion and to have a voice. To me, yes, I have my career. I have, the things that I do now with the groups that I'm involved with. But at the end of the day, I got started talking about this because I was just a guy in a room that got tired of not using my voice and seeing the group of men in that same room dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. I got mad, and I hit a breaking point. And I think there's a lot of other men out there that are getting to that breaking point, and they want to be good role models for their kids. They want to be good role models for their family. And I think when you do that, when you have those conversations between men, between men and women, it affects people to say, hey, I think I'm the strongest guy in the room. I think I'm the toughest guy in the room. But this cuts me deep, and this hurts me. That doesn't just cut me, it hurts me. But I'm still the toughest guy in the room because I put in the work to understand those things. And it's important for me to know and absorb how I felt because of that. And then try to make it as easy as I can for people that are going through those same experiences to say, hey, you're not alone in this. I've got you. I'm not going to let you fail. We're not going to let you fail. And I think the more we do that, and you have more men recognizing that it's okay to admit that your feelings were hurt. It's okay to admit that you're down, you're sad sometimes. Your reaction can't be to get angry and to get frustrated and take that out on other people. Having those conversations makes it a lot easier for people to relate to you. It's empathy, it's sympathy, it's just relatability. It's taking care of your neighbor. And I think, through the last 2 years, having the conversations that I've had with people, I'm big on mentorship. I mentor law students and young attorneys, and men and women, and we have these talks. Hey, law school was really hard today. Yeah, law school was really hard for me too. I had a really lousy time my first year and a half. It did not feel like a fun experience. You're not alone. And it goes the same for this. Just letting people know that you're not alone, letting men know you're not alone. Let's talk about it and let's problem solve. And then now we're helping everybody.
Yeah. And you don't have to be a big speaker. You don't have to go on a podcast to have, whatever conversation. It can be just the conversations within your group of people that allow men to start understanding that it is okay to talk about these things. And then on the flip side, being a woman talking about domestic violence, and like you mentioned, it's prevalent with women being the victim, and looking out and seeing other women you're talking to and men aren't always abusers. Women can be abusers as well in either hetero or homosexual relationships. But it is disheartening because if men are the abusers, how are they getting there? How are other men not allowing it? But where is this tolerance? And I know you and I had a conversation before we started recording where there's that whole locker room talk and there's that devaluing of women that can happen. And over time, does that build up into being more tolerant of abuse? And as a woman saying this, saying, okay, well, you're like, oh God, that girl's hot. Let me go grab her ass. And the buddy's like, yeah, go do it. Go do it. And then, oh, the wife she got a little mouthy. So I had to smack her around a little bit and being okay with that too. I say something like that and men are looking at me like, you are way too sensitive and you are way overreacting. But to have men saying something similar, it has a completely different impact. How do you feel about all of that?
I agree with you 1,000,000% on that. And I think that's why the conversations need to be had. I'm sorry. You know, I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, and WWE was white hot fire. And a lot of it was scantily clad women rolling around in oil and jello and mud and stuff. And that was the norm then. Nobody thought about it. But that's the way that entertainment escalated over time. We went from the damsel in distress to, now we're promoting these women and objectifying these women. I'm still a wrestling fan to this day. But the product has changed, and now you're seeing women being uplifted in different ways, and it's cool to see that evolution of it. But when you're looking at those instances of the locker room talk, I don't know if it's where I come from with my background. I grew up in an Italian household. You don't talk about my mother. You don't talk about my sister. You don't talk about my grandmother. You can say whatever you want about me. You're leaving the women in my life alone. But I don't think that's unique to Italians. I think that's everybody. But I think it's as simple as that. If you're a man and you hear someone talking like that, and if your thought isn't, would you say that about my mom? Would you say that about my sister? Would you want someone saying that about your daughter? Is that how you want your daughter to be treated? Now you got some soul searching you got to do. You don't, like you said, you don't have to get on a podcast. You don't have to talk a lot about this. In those moments, you don't even have to speak up. It's different for everybody else. I'm at a point in my life where I feel confident in saying, don't talk like that. Especially don't talk like that in front of me. That's not for everybody. And I don't hold everyone to that standard because my experiences are my experience. And there's a reason I feel comfortable doing that. That's not the same for everybody else. Silence isn't always the answer. But if it's a one-on-one thing and someone's saying, one of your buddies is saying something about a girl across the bar or in the restaurant or wherever it is that you're at and you don't like it, walking away, if that's something you're comfortable with and being like, yeah, I'm kind of done for the night, that can be effective too. Now, staying silent as the behavior escalates and the talks escalate, that's a different story. But if you don't have the confidence or the feeling of safety and security to confront that person with that, there are other options that you could do. If you see another guy, bothering a girl somewhere, bothering a woman somewhere, again, I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. One of my biggest gripes that I have with my teachers was, and I'm bad at math, don't get used to having a calculator all the time. You're not going to have it. And now we walk around with supercomputers in our pockets. You can call 911. You could call 311. You could go up to bar staff, restaurant staff, store staff and say, hey, that guy's being a little aggressive with that girl. Keep an eye on him. There's other options that you could do. You don't always have to be the person that steps in. And I'm not always the person that steps in. Sometimes it is going to somebody that has more resources than you do because they work at the place that you're at, or they, own the place that you're at, the house that you're at, wherever it is. But yeah, there's locker room talk with the boys where if you want to rib on each other, and poke jabs at each other, that's one thing. But once you cross that line and you start objectifying men, women, you start kind of being loose with your morals. That's I think where you got to draw that line, and any man, and just say, not for me. Like don't talk about that. And then hopefully they pick up on it, or hopefully the people around you pick up on it and they stand with you and they say, yeah, man, that's not funny. That's not an okay thing for you to say. Because you never know how many people are on your side until somebody finally speaks up and says something. And I get it. It's an intimidating thing to do. It's a scary thing to do because that room could turn on you. But that's why walking away is another good option. And like I said, silence isn't, it gets to a point where silence can't be an option. But there are certainly circumstances where you can show your objection without having to be vocal or being overly assertive if you feel the situation is unsafe for yourself.
Right. And I did want to point that out is because sometimes the situation can be unsafe and it can escalate. A lot of domestic violence homicides don't always involve the primary victim. It can be bystanders or somebody who tries to intervene, law enforcement even. So definitely watch yourself. But like you mentioned, there are so many resources that you can use if you are witnessing something that needs some sort of an intervention. Another thing I wanted to say is, yeah, it's going to suck if you take a stance and everybody is like, oh my God, what are you doing? You're way too sensitive. But then you think about that person who is being devalued or abused in front of you and what's going through their minds. And to see that there is, whether it's somebody you know or a stranger, to see somebody sticking up for you, that might just give that person that little inkling of a push of, I can get out of this. I don't have to stay like this. Or that person recognizes what I'm going through is not okay too. It's not just in my mind. So it's a huge impact. Something very subtle that you can do can make a very, very huge impact on what happens with that person going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree with that more. That's the great thing about that is everything happens for a reason. And I think this is a really great example of that. Earlier this week, a very good friend of mine was had some involvement at her work where someone was less than appropriate with her. And she was deciding, what do I do with this? And she reached out to me and a couple other friends and we sat down, we talked, we exchanged messages. And part of that conversation was, you do what you got to do. If you don't feel comfortable reporting it, we're still going to have your back. But if you choose to report it, you're not alone. We're going to have your back regardless of that. We want you to report it, but we're going to stand by you. And what you're doing by reporting this behavior is not only advantageous for yourself, but who knows how many other people you're helping along the way. And part of that conversation was, I think, impactful because doing the right thing, which is some of the best advice that I got early on as a prosecutor, day one as a prosecutor, was, Anthony, your job is to do one thing and one thing only, and that's the right thing. And I believe in that to this day, that's the role, the obligation of that role. But I also think it's the obligation for us as people, as members of our communities, family members, everything, society. Doing the right thing, though, isn't always easy, and it's scary. And it's scary because it's impactful. But once you do the right thing and you take that step, you realize that the people on the other side of it that are engaging in that bad behavior, that aggressive behavior, that gross talk, the lewd actions. Now the spotlight is turned on them. And everything that you were scared about gets turned on them. So now they have to be scared because now they're being held accountable for their actions. And to me, that's what makes you a hero. That's what makes you eligible to put your cape on, fly around the city, and find the other people that you want to try and help save. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be as simple as someone says something inappropriate to me at work, and I'm going to report it. To me, that makes you a hero because now you're potentially stopping that person from harassing and bothering and potentially escalating their behavior to someone else. And I hope and pray that that's never the case, but the sad truth is that is the case. That is what happens when behavior doesn't go checked. It escalates. Like you said, most household murders, domestic violence murders, escalate over time. And I'm glad you brought that up because I actually pulled up the Illinois domestic violence statute, which I am very familiar with. And it's someone commits the act of domestic violence if they, I got to read it. I just said I know it so well. Now I got to read it.
That happens to me all the time.
If he or she knowingly, without legal justification, by any means causes bodily harm to any family or household member or makes physical contact of an insulting or provoking nature with any family or household member. And it escalates, depending on the level of the offense. This is the misdemeanor statute for it. The felony charge goes up and up and up with different categories for it. But what people don't realize is that domestic violence is the answer to the equation of what happens when domestic abuse goes unchecked. Because domestic abuse is not exclusively domestic violence. And when you get to the violent aspect of it, the abuse has been escalated. It starts with, why isn't dinner ready? Why isn't the house clean? I don't want to go there with those people. Why do you talk to those people? No, I'm not going to give you money to pay for that. It's your job. It's we're married. We have to go to the bedroom now. It escalates. There's different forms of abuse, and violence is the worst part of it because that's where we lose people. And I'll tell you now, and I won't speak for everyone in law enforcement, but I'll speak for my experience in it. The most horrifying cases, all of the grenades, every DV case that came through, you had to worry about what is the potential of this exploding and turning into something worse. And that's the sad facts about it, is that once you get to that stage, it's already really, really bad. And those people have been going through some really, really bad things. And it's because we're not talking about it to stop getting those messages across. Like, don't talk about that girl that way. Don't talk about that woman that way. Don't, go up and think you can just, grab her by the arm and say, hey, can I buy you a drink? It's not okay behavior. And if you don't check that, we end up in an incredibly worse position.
Right. I mean, one of the tactics abusers have is to isolate their victims and surround themselves by people who support them. Well, if they start losing their support, if they actually in turn become isolated because of their behavior, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop the abuse, but maybe it'll slow it down. Or, because honestly, I think abusers are just going to abuse. For the most part, I don't know that there's an external factor that they wouldn't have abused if they weren't, using drugs, if they weren't drunk. It's in them already. But, maybe it'll give that victim a chance to get out or a chance to recognize what's happening to them. So, yeah, I mean, they isolate their victims, isolate the abusers, and, give support to the victims by walking away, by not tolerating that kind of behavior.
Yeah, I agree. That's, I think, one of the biggest issues we face is preventing, which I don't know how you prevent the isolation. I don't know how, as someone not in the household or in the relationship, that you can, fully prevent that from the outside. But what you can do is provide options, little things, little check-ins, text messages, phone calls. They don't have to be long. They don't have to be in depth. But to let people know that they have a safe space, that they have options. I've had plenty of conversations over, my career, both, as a professional and in my personal life, to talk about, what do you have going on? Is everything okay at home? Do you need anything? I just want to make sure everyone's okay. And they're never easy. It always feels messy. It always feels like you're running against the brick wall. But the one time that someone opens up and, even if it doesn't get them fully out of the situation that they're in, the relationship that they're in, for at the very least, a couple minutes, you gave that person relief to feel safe, to let them know that there's an option out there, that there's a place that you can go, a number that you could call, and hopefully that snowballs the same way that the cycle of abuse snowballs. Hopefully that cycle of contact and communication snowballs into a bigger option for them to explore the other options to get out, to call, the Wings hotline, to call the domestic violence hotline, call family shelter services, whatever your options are, to call friends, families, like, hey, I got to get out of here. He's going to work and I got to, he or she's going to work and I got to get out of here. I got to pack the kids up and go. Those environments exist and they're real and they're happening right now while you and I are talking. And I think that's the only way that you take steps in solving, might not be the right word, but correcting the path that people are on, that families have been on, for as long as any of us can remember. And again, I take it all back to communication, just to letting people know you're not alone. You're not alone. And like I said, before, you don't have to have a lot of experience. You don't have to have any experience in this to just say that's not behavior that I accept. And I'm not okay with this person being treated this way. So, hey, here's a number you could call. I probably can't see it off camera. Here's a number you could call and slide over a business card or whatever it is. Anything. Do anything. I know these are really broad and general statements, and it doesn't seem very insightful at all. But I think the more that you just talk to people to have those conversations and let them know you're not alone. It goes a long way and it breaks people out of that cycle.
Right. I mean, these are very subtle things, but the thing is, subtlety can be profound. And, to be in a relationship where your reality is twisted and truth is being completely distorted and you're believing that you deserve this kind of abuse or this is how everyone else is treated. This is just how relationships are. But then to see someone else saying, no, that's not okay. That's not how you're supposed to be treated. That can be, like I said, so profound. And I'm glad you mentioned numbers because I do want to take that transition to start talking about Wings and,
sure,
what that organization is, what they do, and the impact.
Wings is phenomenal. Truly some of the most incredible people with the biggest hearts that I've ever come across. For anyone that's interested, that's listening, you can find their website at wingsprogram.com. Specifically, one thing that I think is important for people that are either going through abuse, know someone that's being abused, or if you're looking to get involved, they have a page, wingsprogram.com/understanding-domestic-violence. And that takes you through a little bit of what I talked about today regarding the escalation of domestic abuse and the different forms of it. But they offer a variety of things. So it's not just a shelter service. Wings has resale shops, where people that have limited means and that have been struggling, that are going through the ringer with their relationships, they could buy clothes, they could buy furniture, They have safe houses, and the safe houses are open to men, women, children, and pets. There are certain limitations there, but primarily everyone, for the most part, is welcome under the Wings roof there. They're also doing extensive work in not just providing resources for people that are suffering domestic abuse, but they are actively researching different ways to not only address the problem, but address the problems that are being caused by the bigger problem. So one of their big initiatives right now is addressing traumatic brain injuries. And I think that's an immensely, immensely important thing for everyone to be talking about, specifically areas of law enforcement and prosecution, because on a national football level, national sports, professional sports, quarterback goes down, goes immediately into concussion protocol. No one's asking the quarterback, what were the last 6 plays you ran? No one's asking that question to those guys, because we all saw it. You see the guy go down, he's tensed up, he's not moving. Oh my God, it's a terrifying moment to see. But when a domestic violence victim can't remember, how many times did he punch you in the head? How long did he strangle you for? How long did you lose consciousness for? And maybe that's a too big of an exaggeration to make there. I don't think it is, but for the sake of the argument, even how many times did he hit you? Did she hit you? Did they hit you? I don't remember. And you got a big welt on your head. Are we gonna say that there's a lack of evidence there, that we're not gonna, she's not credible, he's not credible because there's a memory lapse there, because either they're lying or maybe they've suffered a traumatic brain injury or any kind of brain injury that's affected their short-term memory. That's a huge issue. And that's something that Wings is tackling head on. And it's incredible to see that. And I think that's going to make a world of difference in how cases are investigated and prosecuted. And I think it's going to change the way that victims are treated in hospitals and, in safe houses. Yeah. So anyone that's interested in Wings, please check out their website. You can feel free to contact me too. I'll give you my contact information, but yeah, wingsprogram.com. That's the place to find them.
Yeah, memory loss is a very common thing with abuse victims because of traumatic brain injury, strangulation, and sometimes it's even just the psychological effect of being verbally, emotionally abused for so long. It's your brain, it goes into a self-preservation mode. It's trying to survive. You're trying to survive. So that's really great that they're looking into that. I like that you use the football analogy because I know you're in Chicago. I don't know if you're a Chicago fan. I'm a Packers fan. So I thought of Jordan Love and his 2 weeks of concussion protocol. But, and I guess for listeners listening, we are recording the day before the big playoff game.
Go Bears.
This is a huge, my kids are asking, they're like, why is this such a big deal? I'm like, this to me might be more important than the Super Bowl. Because,
this is the Super Bowl.
Yeah. They beat us once. That's not supposed to happen. That rarely happens. So, you guys have a better record. It's going to be a big game. I'm trying to decide if I watch it with people or not. I might be better off not watching.
I'm not even willing to talk about the game because I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to give my thoughts. I don't want to wish for anything. I just hope both teams have a good time.
Yeah. Right. I'm sure that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure that's it. Okay. Well, I do want to get into your contact information, but before we do, is there anything that you think we missed? Any topics that we didn't touch on?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think this is a really good conversation. So, okay. So you did mention the Wings website, but if you can do that again, and then any other contact information that you want to throw out there for people to either get in touch with you or Wings.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Wings website, which I really do encourage, all the listeners here to take a look at, is wingsprogram.com. That's the best way to see, everything that Wings has to offer there. Event pages, newsletters, how to volunteer, how to get involved, their hotline numbers. If you want to donate, there's ways to donate on there. If you want to contact me specifically, you can get me at Pasquini, common spelling, PASQUINILAW @gmail.com, pasquinilaw@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook, Anthony Pasquini, and LinkedIn, Anthony Pasquini as well. I'm happy to talk to anybody about how to get involved in the movement, anyone that's going through it and, just needs even if just need a sounding board and a little bit of direction, I'm happy to do that as well. But wingsprogram.com and pasquinilaw@gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. And so do you have any lasting words of encouragement or wisdom that you would like to leave with listeners today?
Certainly encouragement. I don't know a lot about wisdom, so hopefully a little bit of both. But for anyone out there that's listening, that's going through it, man, woman, like we talked about, at the beginning and pretty much this whole thing, this is an issue that transcends everything. And if you're having a hard time, if you're having a hard time vocalizing what it is that you're feeling, you're not alone. If you're a man out there who feels like you're not being heard and you've got things that you want to say, or you're tired of, you're a guy like me who's just sitting in a room and realizing, oh my God, there's not enough people doing anything. You're not alone. We're not curing cancer. We're not building rocket ships. We're taking care of each other. And little things like having conversations, little things like checking in on your neighbors, checking in on your family, checking in on your friends. And, if you've got the confidence and the courage and the ability to speak up when you see something, great. And if you're not at that point yet, but you got to do something, that's great too. So, you're not alone. There are things that you have going on out there. And most importantly, I think collectively we all just want to see each other do well and to feel loved and to feel cared for and to feel protected. That's what we all want, is a safe place for us all to be able to lay our heads at night, watch our kids grow up and do well, watch the Bears beat the Packers. And
No.
but really to just to see everyone succeed and feel safe and be happy. So you're not alone. If there's anything that I can do to help out, I will certainly do my best. But if you're going through it, please know that you're not alone and that there's options out there.
Well, thank you. That was very well said, minus the Bears thing. I really appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate the work Wings is doing, you using your voice to speak out. It's so it's courageous, and it's really, really appreciated. As, a woman, a survivor, it's heartwarming, and it's I don't know, it's hopeful. It gives a lot of hope to understand that there are people out there that didn't have a personal experience with it, but that are willing to take the stance against domestic violence. So I really appreciate everything you're doing and for coming on today.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity for being here.
All right. And go Pack. Thank you again, Anthony, for joining me today. And thank you, Warriors, for listening. I've included the links Anthony was referring to, as well as his 1 in 3 profile in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.